Got 20 seconds. Come on, Amanda, go.
Keep moving. Good. Get those knees up. Explode. Good. Explode. Let's go. Up.
Rock forward. Let's go. One more. Go.
You are listening to the Fight Strength Podcast with your hosts, Phil Daru and Jason Burgos.
Hello all and welcome back to episode 25 of the Fight Strength Podcast. I am Jason Burgos, senior editor for MMAsucker.com, and I'm excited to introduce you to a very special edition of the show. Since it is the holidays, you could almost call this our Festivus episode, because in the time-honored tradition of that famous Seinfeld episode, we will be taking a bunch of time to just air grievances. However, the show's grievances will be directed at a specific source. Now, before we get to that, I would be remiss in not getting to our holiday bearers of frustration. First, of course, is my podcasting wingman, strength and conditioning mastermind of American Top Team, the bearded wonder, Phil Daru. Phil Daru, happy holidays.
Yeah, happy holidays, buddy. How you doing? You still eating that, drinking them eggnog and getting ready to get fat again?
Oh my God, eggnog and the apple cider, just delicious.
I bet it is.
Now, also airing grievances today, and like a third co-host in this panel of grievance airing is a man that defines friend of the show. He's the only man to have ever been on the show twice, now 3 times. Plus, he's the only man to have ever filled in as a guest co-host, and that is the strength and conditioning commander-in-chief at Longo and Weidman MMA, the ageless Hulk himself, Tony Ricci. Tony, what is up?
What's up, gentlemen? You know, this is becoming the highlight of my entire life. I gotta have you. I want you to know that. I look forward to it. Happy to be back, and I hope you're putting some creatine in that eggnog, Jason.
Of course. Yeah, for sure.
Good man.
Now, I am very excited about this episode, and you MMA lovers listening should be excited too. On this edition of the show, we have 2 of the best minds in the sport when it comes to strength training, nutrition, just all the factors it takes to get a fighter in optimal shape, in Tony Ricci and Phil Daru. These gentlemen are going to pull the curtain back a smidge in what may be one of the great kind of misnomers going around in the industry right now. And that is the idea that what we know as the organization Perfecting Athletes is one of the best, and that they're one of the best sources for fighters' nutrition plans and making weight, because that's what they're supposedly all about. That's what their reputation is based on. For the folks that don't know, during their time around the industry, this group, they have grown quite a reputation. They're pretty well known, and they've worked with superstar fighters like Chris Weidman, Joanna Jedrzejczyk, Ray Borg, Amanda Nunes, Daniel Strauss, King Mo, Stephen Thompson. These are elite fighters. They are pretty influential in things right now, and you both have had experiences with them, not really positive. We want to talk a lot about this. There's a major story going on with Joanna Jedrzejczyk right now with Perfecting Athletes. They've had issues with Ray Borg in the past. The first thing I want to ask both you gentlemen is just in a few words, and I'll start with you, Phil. What are the first words that comes to your mind when you hear the name Perfecting Athletes?
The first words?
Yeah, a couple of things that make you, when you think of Perfecting Athlete, this is what comes to mind right away.
You want the real?
I want the real. I want the real deal. I want that hot fire.
But let me first off by saying that, like, this is no, bash on them personally or how they are, as individuals, as human beings. But from an organization standpoint, from what they do as a professional or as a profession, I don't feel like they are accurate in their approaches. Let's just put it like that.
Tony, the words that come to mind when you think of Perfecting Athletes?
The first word, to be very honest, and I repeat Phil's sentiments, and that I'm sure they're wonderful individuals, but to work with in fight sports, the best word I can have is unfortunately uncooperative.
Oh, very good.
Now, you both had experiences with Tony. You can continue on. What were your first experiences with this group? Like, how did you come about even finding out about them? How did you first learn about them? Like how did you first come in contact with them specifically in your work with, like, Longo MMA and the fighters that you have represented?
Well, first, I think I should preface it, Jason, by saying that one of the things that I try to do every day is learn and improve. And, it's very important to know what you don't know. There's an old saying, right? Idiots are absolutely certain about everything. Intelligent people constantly question themselves and what they do. And that is something that I do. So, I'm always open to learning, and I'm always open to saying, hey, well, maybe I got to improve things. And so my interaction came with them because they were working, with a fighter, and I was doing both the nutritional work and the strength and conditioning work. And at that time, I was unaware that I had not known of the company, and they, that they were going to be doing my fighter's nutritional work. I started maybe the first 4 weeks of camp with them, and then he started his camp early, so maybe another 7 or 8. And I was told that I was to speak to, my fighter's nutritionist, and I said, absolutely, let me see what they have to say and what they want to do, and I'm happy to collaborate or follow their lead. And for me, it was a little bit different. I was supposed to be having a conversation. It wasn't a conversation. It was really, to be honest with you, and I have 2 students who sat in with me. I was actually at the university at the time, and they were my 2 grad assistants. And I figured, hey, listen in, this would be great. We'll learn, we'll share information. And I'm going to speak to this woman who's, very good, and we're going to exchange ideas. So for me, it was a 1-hour beatdown of everything I was doing, to be honest with you. It was everything that was wrong with my nutritional protocols. My supplementation protocols were no good. The way I was approaching training, even though it was not yet even addressed, was inaccurate and not well done. Yeah. And so the point was, I was there to collaborate with ideas and even fulfill what some of the individual, her expectations were from PA. And that wasn't the case. As I said, it was it was not a conversation. It was, here's what I need you to do. Here's what I want you to do. Here's what you're doing wrong. And it was very much, and I'll give some defense in the fact that this individual didn't know me at all, but they definitely were looking at me as if I was a stupid weight training musclehead that was going to make this fighter, put on 80 pounds of muscle and take whey protein all day. That was my objective as a strength coach, not knowing that my approach is quite comprehensive. So my first experience was, like I said, I sat back and I think Jason, me, Phil, I'm very patient. I'm very open-minded, but I took a bath for an hour. It wasn't a conversation. It was everything that was didactic. In better words, here was the issue I had. I'm 52. I've dedicated my life to academia, exercise physiology, strength and conditioning, the fight world for over 20-something years. And I'm still not sure every day, just focusing on that alone, if I've got this down correctly. Well, when speaking to this individual, my issue is they had 7 disciplines in which they stated they were absolute experts in. And that was bewildering to me, because I don't know how somebody can be an expert in 1 medical discipline, 2 medical disciplines, although they're not licensed in either, a fitness expert, a strength and conditioning expert, a nutrition expert, an expert in herbs, an expert in, and that's very difficult to do. Yeah. It really is. So I'm being as diplomatic as I can in saying that my first interaction was, even people who don't like me never spoke to me that way. I think that's the best way for me to sum it up, to be honest.
And that's crazy. I mean, like you just mentioned, you have a resume, like you have a master's degree specifically in nutrition. I mean, like they probably didn't even need to go to anybody else. They could have just went to you. I mean, you've worked in the sport, since the 90s and even a little further back, with fighters. So you have a wealth of experience in what it takes for a fighter to cut weight on so many different levels. So them to do that is just absolutely stunning. I mean, Phil, now to you, I mean, what was your earliest and first experiences with this particular group? I'm hoping it was a little bit more friendly than what Tony had to deal with.
I didn't know them either when they came to the gym. I knew that Joanna was working with them primarily, and that they were actually taking care of everything, from even just like washing her clothes and making her meals and writing on water bottles and things like that. But the case of the matter was that I was left in the dark with a lot of their protocols, which really was weird to me because a lot of the times with all of my fighters, we have a full conversation of what they're actually putting in their body on a daily basis so we can enhance the performance aspects of what we're trying to do. Also, I didn't hear directly from them, but I heard from other people that they didn't necessarily agree upon what I was doing, or they were trying to put into her head that I was doing something wrong as far as maybe trying to make her a bodybuilder or trying to something along the lines of that, where they don't know anything of what my program or what my periodization standpoints go from. They didn't look into any of my modalities and any of my methodologies of what I do for these fighters. So from that point, I was just like, these people really don't care, or they don't understand anything. So from that point of view, like I never really got to talk to them for more than, I don't know, maybe 2 minutes, to be honest. So we never had a full conversation like Tony did with Michelle. They were always, cordial to me, but at the end of the day, if I'm hearing things through other fighters, through other coaches, and that, the one thing that really got me was one day and this was about, I want to say maybe 6 weeks out from the Rose fight or this last fight. And we were pushing a prowler.
Yes,
and
I was hoping you tell the story. I was hoping you would.
Yeah. And I told you about this, Jason, but she was pushing the prowler. We were basically doing strength endurance work. Now, those of you who don't know, this is no eccentric loading, right? So you're not really going to build massive amount of hypertrophy. You're not going to build muscle with this. This is more of a conditioning tool and a strength endurance tool, or you can build absolute strength depending upon how much load you put on the prowler. What I was trying to accomplish in this certain time frame was we were doing anaerobic conditioning. Basically, we were sprinting with the prowler under light loads to enhance the ability to have anaerobic conditioning abilities. So after she was doing this, we've done it. We were going, I think it was like our second or third set, and she started to feel like, obviously blood pumped to the muscle of her legs. So I'm seeing her with a change of demeanor that I never really seen her with. And she has basically, if you know Joanna, you know that she's a monster, man. She comes in, she's ready to train, she's focused. Nothing really bothers her. And something was bothering her while she was pushing this prowler. And the guys were with her, and I thought maybe it was just because, she was just getting frustrated because the guys were, obviously going to push it faster. So she was getting frustrated with that. And then she finishes her push. She looks up at me and goes, "I don't want to do this anymore." And I've never heard for the whole year I've been training her, I've never heard her ever say this to me. And I go, "Well, why?" And she goes, "Well, they told me that my legs are getting too big and that I need to stop training my legs." Now we are 6 weeks out. We have plenty of time for this. And first of all, she doesn't know what she doesn't know what we're trying to accomplish with this certain exercise. Mm-hmm. But they told her, for me, not to do certain things, which now you're taking away my abilities as a coach.
Yep.
By putting negative things in my fighter's brain to say that what we're doing isn't correct, which is a problem with me. So,
and who's there? It's not even their place. They're the nutritionist. Like, what does that have to do with what you're doing in her preparation for her fight? Like, you guys have dealt with, like, I wanted to ask you both, like, you dealt with other coaches. Like, that seems like overstepping bounds, like, especially when you don't have the level of respect to even do that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah. Well, first I would say this: the most important thing is the face-to-face collaboration, mm-hmm. right? So Phil brought up a wonderful point. Everything is integrated. Nothing is separate. Yeah. And when it is separate, we run into problems. And what I mean by that is the nutrition feeds the conditioning. It feeds the workouts. It feeds the recovery. Sleep feeds that. The skill coaches feed what the type of conditioning might be. It's all one piece. And to separate it and not, first of all, not have a good idea of what's going on, they should be watching Phil's conditioning first, because if they did watch it, and watching sparring, by the way, they may better know how to feed their athlete and help their athlete recover. It is very important, in my opinion, to be that integrated into the camp. So the first thing is that without being there and seeing what Phil's doing, I think it's insanity to make such an accusation. But that collaboration with coaches, you can't separate, you can't isolate. There's nothing that's a quadrant in MMA. So the very absence in itself, and pulling yourself from the rest of the camp and then making commands from that isolated part of the camp, is a tremendous flaw, particularly when you have a strength coach who's been working with her for so long, and her skill coaches have been working with her for so long. So one of the issues that I have is absence. From the point of absence in a camp, I'm not saying be at every sparring session. I'm not saying if you're a nutritionist, watch every conditioning session Phil is doing. But if you want to know how to feed your athlete and make adjustments for your athlete and know the inherent changes that are occurring during the camp, you have to be part of the camp. You can't sit from behind a desk somewhere and then tell Phil, well, you're inducing hypertrophy and here's what's wrong with your training protocols. So that's a tremendous problem that I have in step one. The whole point is, as a coach, okay, the first thing you ever do as a strength coach is talk to the skill coaches, because you don't want to do anything that's contradictory to maybe their goals or objectives. So you cannot make such a comment from a distance. That's part of the issue I had too, is commentary, didactic commands without knowing what's really going on or what's even going on in the camp, telling me what percentage of body fat a fighter should be. First of all, the total percentage was impossible for my client or my fighter. And you're not there, and then telling me, well, the way I do body fat is by eye.
What?
So my point, so literally, that's it. I'm like, well, because I remember having a conversation saying, well, here's the body fat that I'm projecting our fighter will be at, because by projecting body fat to the scale, I know how many pounds of fat loss is going to contribute to my scale weight. And I had asked them, here's what I have now as a percentage, and here's where I'd like to arrive. What do you think? Well, that's not important to me, and I do it by eye, and I want them at a number that the person won't be at till 6 months after they're dead, actually. So that's how low the number was. So the point to all of this is, until you're integrated into all this and a complete part of it, and watching what's going on, making commands or making suggestions in the regard to what was done with Phil, it's erroneous. That's the best way to look at it.
No, I mean, before we get into the whole Joanna thing and UFC 217 that set this recent stories off about. I mean, Phil, what has been your experience in terms of how they clearly they talk nonsense to you without even, it doesn't seem like they don't even go to you and talk to you. I mean, Tony's talking about how everything's integrated, coaches talk to each other. He's very close with Ray Longo at that gym. You see the relationship they have. What, when with your comparison to normal camps with other fighters like Mark Jacasey and King Mo, how closely do you work with the other coaches at ATT? And like guys like Mike Brown, and then in comparison to them and the Joanna group and how her coaches, I mean, do they even talk? Do they do the same stuff to guys like Mike Brown? Do they even come into the gym and look at stuff? Or this is all from a distance and they're not integrated like they should be, since they're such an important cog of a fighter's camp?
I mean, yeah, they did converse with Mike Brown a lot. I know that. They were in practices a lot. But they were almost there, almost like overstepping their boundaries in a lot of times where they really didn't need to be there at certain points. It was just there for moral support. But even then, for me, I don't think they actually respected me as a professional at all by any means, because I've never really seen them. They never really had a full conversation with me. I did message them right before we started camp, and I did say that I was trying to elaborate on what we were trying to accomplish in this camp from a physical preparation standpoint, and they basically just, I don't know if they shrugged it off, but they were like, okay, thank you, and then I never really heard anything else. So for me, I just took it as they didn't really respect me as a professional and as a coach. But the thing is that I never really got to speak with them one-on-one at all. And I did try to reach out, which was very disheartening for me, because I did try to reach out, and Joanna is one of my, obviously she's close to me, you know what I mean? She's one of my fighters. She's a champion, and I was just trying to help out the situation as much as I possibly could, but I felt like I was getting pigeonholed, and that I didn't really get to fully understand their methodologies or their protocols for what they were doing with her. I think I did hear her tell me that they didn't really count calories, and that, you know, they just went by feel. So I didn't understand that, you know, that methodology in a sense, because at the same time you need to have statistical data and actually have something written down so that you can pull or put together something if something arises, that if she's not feeling well or she's gaining weight, she's losing weight. You have to have some type of numerical order or data there to actually see what's going on, and not just have to pull things that aren't supposed to be pulled. So I think that was the issue from the beginning. And it just shows structure. It shows professionalism. It shows that you have your shit together, basically. And I didn't really see that. But now, like I said, I really can't say much because I was left in the dark. I really was. The only time I ever got to talk to them is if I actually reached out to them. And then again, I really got like very vague answers, you know, and responses. So I don't know, you know.
And correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, both of you tell me if I'm wrong here. I get all the facets of a camp, the fight preparation in terms of strategy, nutrition, strength and conditioning, all these aspects are closely connected. But I would think the nutrition and strength and conditioning are as married as any part of the camp, because it's building the fighter outside and in. I mean, shouldn't the nutritionist and the strength and conditioning coach be closely locked into building the athlete, and the coaches are handling kind of a different kind of aspect?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly, which is why I tried to dedicate my life to both.
Exactly.
Jason, because the point of it is, you know, I see the training sessions. Look, not everybody, and I understand that not every nutritionist or strength coach will be like Phil and I, where we spend our time fully invested in fight camps. We're surrounded by fighting. We watch fighting. Phil fought, you know, pro level. And so that's okay. I'm not saying that, you know, if you're not there all the time and you're a nutritionist from another coast and your fighter's on this coast, it's all bad and everything along those lines. But they are highly integrated. And you have to know the complete volume of training sessions. So my point is, you know, how do you prescribe nutrition, a nutritional practice, and again, guessing calories if you don't know training, total training volume, the estimated time of the volume, relative amounts of caloric expenditure for each training session, estimated caloric expenditure for each day, the transitional caloric expenditure that occurs in the fighting, in the fighter during the camp. So for example, if my fighter starts at 212 and it's 5 weeks later and he's 203, I can't be feeding them the same way. The training volume has changed because we're getting closer. The emphasis in training may have changed. We may be doing more cardiorespiratory than we were early in the camp. The fighter's body composition has changed. The timing of their sessions has changed in some cases. And all of this leads into, okay, what do we do? Do we adjust calories? Do we increase protein? Are they losing too much lean mass? We try to test this. We keep an eye on it. Just because they're at 203 from 212 doesn't mean they're at the 203 they should be. They could have lost 6 pounds of muscle tissue and 3 pounds of fat, which would be completely against what we're trying to achieve. One of the ways to mitigate that, of course, is the dietary practice and the friggin' supplement practice, okay, which is so vital to this. Because this concept of holistic nutrition and let me just make one thing clear on nutrition, and this is where I'm getting mad, okay?
You dropped frickin' twice. I could sense it.
Yeah, well, listen to this. Oh, if you eat a balanced diet, you can get everything you need from food. What the blank does that mean? First of all, that's the general population. That's number one. Number two, what are you using? The DRI? in RDA to say you're getting your optimal nutritional requirements, because those are essentially developed to prevent subclinical deficiencies, not optimal performance. That's one thing. And three, now we're dealing with an athlete whose metabolic turnover is through the roof. 3 sessions a day, fracturing bones during camp, inflammation, ligament strains. And you're telling me that there needs to be no adjustment, no supplementation, and that mostly vegan protein is going to be sufficient in order to get them through the camp? No, you can't. This is why you can't take, as Phil said, the nutrition away from the strength and conditioning, or away from the skill training. They're all integrated. And this is why you don't have to run the whole camp. Phil and I don't have to run the whole camp, but we want to be in close ties with what's going on with the nutritionists and the skill coaches. Because if Phil had a particular training session planned on Wednesday for Joanna or any of the guys down at ATT, and that one of the fighters' training schedule gets changed to a sparring 2 hours later, he's got to make that change. Well, the same thing happens in dietary practice. The same, you've got to know what's going on with the fighter, and you've got to measure things. The measurements are not perfect, all right? But I can't just go, oh, great, my fighter's 203, you're right on target. How the hell do you know? You didn't take lean mass, you didn't take total water, you're not looking at body fat. All of these things impact how nutrition should be adjusted. We all know when somebody weighs 212, they don't need the same amount of calories they do at 185. So Phil's right, calories aren't perfect. You don't have to sit there and go 2341.25, but feel? What do you mean feel? You don't go by feel. You're not the one feeling it. The fighter's feeling it. So all of this stuff and all the data you can acquire during camp, while not perfect, has relevance. Exactly. Caloric intake and all of these things are really important. And another thing, too, if Phil's got one of his fighters is losing power or distance on a broad jump, all right, well, that's a huge indication for him. That shouldn't be happening. Maybe they've trained too much. Maybe they're not sleeping enough. Maybe their protein's down. This is why the integration of all of these particular disciplines together are vital, and an understanding of them is vital, not the arrogance that you know all of the disciplines across the board. When I see Phil next, I'm going to have him, as an old man, teach me more of his corrective work, his mobility work. You got to keep learning, keep being open, and no one knows everything. No one knows everything. And this is where I have to tell you, my emotions get a little bit high, because what happens is you're really hurting the fighter in the end. My fighter gets beat up and looks like crap, I'll take the hit. They were deconditioned. In a particular case, I know they weren't deconditioned. They had the worst weight cut rehigh protocol I've ever seen in my life. All right, but you know what? They look like crap. And everybody, all I got was messages. You need to do cardio with this guy next time. You need to do this with this guy next time. I took the hit for a horrible rehydration protocol. All of that's fine, okay? Yep. But the point to all of this is it is all integrated and connected, Jason. And Phil and I can't run everything, but we can understand everything. We can understand everything.
I feel you could take this one. And we will get to the Joanna stuff real soon. But both of you already mentioned their response to how they do things is feel. Now, I respect you guys immensely because you go into the science, the sports science angle of strength and conditioning. I mean, Tony, your work in academia is extremely documented. The double masters, you've been at it. You're a professor at LIU. I mean, Phil, you go into the research. Like, you're not just, I'm in strength conditioning, I'm done, I got my name. No, you go to research. You find these things. You understand. You continue your growth on a scientific level of this industry. As a person that's a novice to this, how ridiculous in this day and age, 2017, this isn't 1997, and back in the days in the UFC or something like that. We've come to such a high level of science and understanding the body. How absurd is to handle championship fighters' nutrition with, this is how I feel. That seems out of control, ridiculous to me. Am I wrong?
No, it's irresponsible and it's disheartening. But the fact of the matter is that that's everywhere, to be honest. It's not just in the nutrition world. It's actually in the strength and conditioning world. It's in the skill practice world. A lot of the times it could be what we call it a good talk game, and people can really get on videos and fool people a lot. And you see it a lot on Instagram, you see it on YouTube. The problem is they have no real educational background, or they don't have the ability, or just don't want to learn more. And that's the thing that me and Tony do on a constant basis, constantly trying to learn from each other. Like Tony, I try to pick Tony's brain as much as possible, because then he has years in the game on top of being a super intelligent guy, you know. So, and I do this with all of my colleagues. I mean, that's what you should do. But I think that they seclude themselves, and I think that they had the right remedy for what they were doing, and nothing else was working, or they couldn't, you know, they didn't want to grow. They didn't want to get better. I don't know what the case was, but at the same time, from what I see, that they were very limited and linear in their approach, and they just didn't really want to go outside the spectrum and learn and grow. And for me personally, I didn't understand how you could put somebody's nutrition plan together and not know the training modalities that they were actually doing, or the bioenergetic demands every day of what they were training. Yeah, I guess they understood that, yeah, she was sparring, yeah, she was grappling. But for me, I'm in a periodization model where each block, we're trying to get a desired stimulus, and the protocol should match the desired stimulus, what we're trying to do to optimally help them perform and recover. And that's not what they were doing, at least from my perspective, for what I was trying to accomplish. And there have been times, and I'm not just saying Joanna, I mean, there's been times that I've heard my other fighters in general that said that, you know, they were actually losing weight. They weren't feeling as great. They were losing strength. They were losing speed. They were losing pop on their punches, things like that. And that's not good. We don't want that. We want to keep on progressing, keep on getting better. You know, it could be the fact that they probably weren't sleeping right either, but at the end of the day, nutrition plays a big role in it. We just talked about this, you know, off air, but, you know, nutrition and sleep are two major factors in performance.
Yep.
And if you don't have that dialed in, it's a big problem. It don't matter what you do in the training room or in the gym. If you don't have your nutrition on point, your performance is going to suffer. So
now let's get into the Joanna stuff. Though I'm looking forward to Tony talking a story about chips and hummus a little later. I think he's going to say friggin' a couple more times. But before we get to that, now for the people that don't know, you know, Joanna lost to Rose Namajunas. Tough decision. She got knocked out first round, but she recently came out in an interview in Poland about some of the stuff that she felt was the reason behind her loss, and some of the quotes she made was, let's see, you know, the mistakes that they made were unforgivable, and this is in reference to perfecting athletes. I can't work with those kinds of people anymore. She talked a lot about how her weight was an issue. It was a really difficult cut at the last few days. And, you know, this is a public firing. I mean, Joanna is a person that's extremely nice. She's been on the show before. Really cool person. And Phil has talked about, you know, with me off there, how close she is with these people. Like, these are friends of hers. So she's not just burying them because she's looking for a way out. These are friends of hers that she's believed in. And if she felt she's lost trust and respect in how they're handling things. I remember when you came to visit New York and I'm picking you up at the hotel, you tell me about it. She had a difficult cut and she was a pound behind and stuff like that. Like, those days leading up to the UFC 217 fight with Rose Namajunas, Phil, what were some of, like, did you see some early signs of a problem that was really going to maybe cost Joanna, and some bad signs of how they were handling her weight cut in this particular fight, a major fight in Madison Square Garden, a big deal fight?
The first sign that I actually seen that raised a red flag for me was in Dallas when she fought Andrade, where I actually got to see the full weight cut because I had other fighters, you know, fighting on that card, and the workout room area was just free for all of the fighters for American Top Team. So I actually got to see her. They weren't secluding her like they did in New York, where nobody really could see her at all. Not even our skills coaches. We were left in the dark, you know. So, but when I did see, I seen her basically looking like a skeleton. She was totally emaciated. I didn't know if she was going to even be able to step on the scale, let alone try to fight the next day. She didn't have any type of she was sunk in totally. Her eyes were black. You know, it was just a tough look, you know, and for me as a coach and ultimately a friend, like I felt bad, and I felt helpless because I really couldn't say anything. And you know, I know what it takes to cut weight. I've done it myself. And I know how it feels. And that type of cut really drains a fighter, and it's very hard to come back from that type of cut, even and especially when you don't have a good rehydration process. So we know that their protocol isn't, you know, it's subpar to say the best, you know. So what I'm trying to say is basically the New York thing was that I heard, you know, she was 15 pounds over the day of weigh-ins. Wow. So what we talked about, and me and Tony, is like, that's crazy. You know, you really, first of all, she's a female and she's a 130-pound female. That's a lot to cut just in general. But
what should she have been at? You know, just give the people that may not understand, like, what should she have been at, considering she was 15 pounds over?
The day of weigh-ins?
Yeah.
I don't like my fighters when they wake up, especially because UFC is weighing in early. Yeah. They should be maybe 3 to 5 pounds over most.
Yeah, particularly for 100. I mean, just quickly, I don't want to interrupt Phil, but 15 pounds, that's 12% body weight.
Yeah.
That's the body weight that you could argue 12% of her body weight is the high end out of camp. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Never mind the day before.
And that's primarily where I like to have my fighters be at, is around 15 to 20 pounds out, like going into camp.
Yeah.
Right.
Not the day of weigh-ins where you wake up at 6 a.m. and weigh-ins are at 9 a.m. Have fun trying to cut that shit. You know what I'm saying? And especially, how are you gonna optimally get her back to performing at 100%? It's not gonna happen. She's gonna be 60% at best.
And what's some of the stuff that you told us that day we all met, we were talking, like some of the stuff she was eating, and you both can answer, especially Tony, you know, your nutrition knowledge. Like, what was like her something? Wasn't she eating certain things at night? Like it was like bananas and honey late at night and something like that. It was not really beneficial at all. And why you can tell us why it's, you know, some of these things are terrible.
Well, I just don't know why. I mean, I don't understand. First, again, you know, and I respect Phil's tone on this, because none of us, you know, like, this is out of character, and I'm not happy to be doing this. I don't want to speak badly about anyone, and so this is really hard for me. But simultaneously, you know, we give our lifetime's work to this, and when we see things that are completely inconsistent with some of the research and years of practice we've been doing, it you can't help but to discuss it. I don't know why anyone would what is the rationale behind going to bed on bananas and honey? Now,
is that what it was, Phil? I forget what you
I
told
think
us.
It was something like that. Yeah, I
mean, from what I heard through the grapevine, and it's just like small little snippets of what I've got to see.
And maybe it wasn't true, but
yeah, like I said, because I never really got to understand what the protocols were, because they left me in the dark. So, but what I've come to find out, that they were trying to spike insulin, well, basically spiking insulin before she went to bed. I don't know why that was, or what their thought process was behind that. You know.
Okay, so that was the goal, apparently. Okay, well, whatever they were using,
I would probably say maybe.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, you can spike insulin via protein sufficiently enough to induce muscle protein synthesis. I'm probably sure that could happen, for one, and two, what we do know, and let's assume
which
that
would be a better option.
Yes, and let's assume that this wasn't the case. It's just a good tidbit of information that we can share together and discuss together. You know, going to bed on protein has been pretty well established of late to have no impact. I mean, you can raise insulin, you can induce muscle protein synthesis, repaired in the evening, and not really affect beta oxidation or body fat burning. Like the nighttime feeding studies show that you can go to bed on protein and still pretty much burn as much fat as if you were going to bed fasted. So anyway, one thing that is wonderful for the fighter is if they are hungry and they are in need of more calories, not just the fighter, for all of us, going to bed on protein could be advantageous, because it might help people like me with an empty gut who sleep better with a full gut do so. It might help induce further recovery. And additionally, it doesn't have anything to do with really impeding the fat burning process, it appears, from the nighttime feeding studies that we're seeing. So going to bed on protein is a good thing to do during weight cuts if you're famished. I do it with my wrestlers all the time. And the other thing is there's a lot of water cost in protein digestion. So your turnover is going to be high. You'll probably drift more by eating a little protein before bed than you would drift if you didn't eat any protein before bed. It's very possible. So anyway, regardless, a protein before bed is a good thing to do during cuts and during really any process in which you're trying to lose body fat.
What I could say is this, Tony, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, but high sugar will ultimately stimulate the kidneys, which will in turn secrete urine. Is that true?
Oh, we can do that. Yes. Oh, yes. So, yeah. But that's a great point. But I can drop water in a host of ways. I mean, diabetes mellitus, by the way, right? Diabetes, Latin for excessive urinary output. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can get excessive urinary output with sugar, but I don't think it's the first thing.
That's how I cut weight. I usually try to get that sugar output for me. It works best.
Well, you eating ice cream.
I think you can drink a lot of water and lose a lot of water, but I see where you're going with that.
What I was trying to, where we're segmenting into that is that, like, after the weight cut, primarily, I would have them have some fast, high glycemic carbohydrates.
That's fine, yeah.
But then after that, you want to kind of eliminate or at least reduce the amount of sugar intake because you don't want them pissing all the time throughout the night and end up, being or cramping and things like that. So that's not
a good point. No, that's the reverse point. Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
Now, I mean, and this is not the first time they've had a fallout with a fighter. I mean, it goes all the way back to in 2000 in September of this year, in that Ray Borg was supposed to fight Demetrius Johnson, which he eventually did, but at UFC 215 he was the fighter, and he had to pull out of that fight. And he too, because of a tough weight cut, he had an illness that was undisclosed. He too publicly kind of fired perfecting athletes and said he's no longer working with them. I mean, now I wanted to bring this up because there's a funny story. Tony, could you bring up the story that you told us about that had to do, because we're talking about food and eating and nutrition, with chips and hummus as a key part of I believe it was a post-workout nutrition program?
Let me be completely fair on where this goes. So after I had the conversation, my fighter's dietary practice was changed drastically. And that's okay. I mean, that's fine. I am using pretty good science. Phil and I have many colleagues that we follow that dedicate their life to research. So we frame our training protocols, our nutritional protocols around that. There's very little guesswork in my supplementation protocols. So anyway, my point to all that is it was completely revamped. And I just shut up. My fighter comes first. I don't want to cause any problems. And so I will limit that. And I can't say definitively. All I know is at that particular point in the camp, my fighter was doing and eating. He had an assistant at that point, and the assistant was getting all the food, up to my knowledge, that was written down or prescribed accordingly by this particular team. And obviously, when somebody has multiple training sessions a day, I'm a much bigger advocate of whey protein shake if they need that, because they'll be training again soon. You could throw a banana in there. You can throw some fruit in there. Fine. Maybe even a slice of peanut butter jelly, whatever you want if you have a couple of hours. And my key thing is to get some protein back in there, because they're tearing up. So not just tissue, they're tearing up muscle tissue, everything. And so the first thing after a training session, my particular fighter was chowing down on, and it's kind of turned into a joke with me and a lot of friends, was hummus and pretzel. And the assistant asked me, "Is this good? There's protein in it, right?" I can only hope. And so let me throw this caveat out there, that was the assistant's prescription and not theirs, because if hummus and pretzels is the concept of a good post-training dietary protocol, then we're just really on a different wavelength. Oh, there is not enough protein in hummus for a goldfish to recover. Absolutely not. And pretzels, I don't get it. There's no nutritional value there. So the whole holistic approach then goes out the window. So yes, there's a big running joke because I saw my fighter, who at the time weighed 209 pounds, maybe 10 pounds during camp, eating hummus and pretzels post-training. And ever since, I've been on a tirade or vehemently against hummus and pretzels. I'll never get a sponsorship from Sabra because I know they sell the pretzels and the hummus together, but it's not a good combination in fight sports. Now, again, let me reiterate one thing. Everything I do, I've got some pretty good people behind me. So it's okay to completely discount everything I believe in. All right. But boy, you better come up with something a little bit more substantive than what I was offered to replace it. That's my point. Okay. You know, expert in this, expert in this particular, in Chinese medicine. And I didn't know that, you know, that the Chinese were ever experts in medicine. I know there's some wonderful herbs over there. That's great. And they do some great things and we should incorporate them. That's all good. But my point to all this is if we're going to strip down a particular approach, if somebody's going to revamp Phil's training protocols, well, it better be, the founders of periodization and Saley and Payson themselves. You know what I mean? Medvedev and all the Russian. That's all I'm saying here. So the problem really became, Jason, is some of everything that we threw out the window, the replacements there were good, but they were not substantive enough. I don't want to say good. Some of them were good, but they were not substantive enough to make the recovery needs and for the fighter that's necessary during the camp. So I'm really just trying to be gentle here. I was in a tirade and I broke several different things that day. When I saw hummus and pretzels coming in as my whey protein shake with low-fat milk, berries, okay, maybe a banana and a little bit of complex carb, depending upon the duration to the next training session. There were a lot of folding chairs that would almost got a speeding ticket on Hempstead Turnpike in Garden City, Long Island.
Phil, I mean, do you think King Mo, Colby Covington, are they big on the pretzels and hummus post-workout nutrition?
Oh, let's not talk about King Mo, please.
Well, he's a heavyweight now, so I guess maybe he does like that.
All right, we need to get him going, man. But his post-workout nutrition is a Pepsi or
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I bet you do. And maybe a sandwich from either Subway or some other like that place. He is amazing.
The guy's a total stud, and he's eating Pepsi and Subway.
Oh, you have no idea, Tony. I try, man.
I get it. I know. Imagine what these guys would be if they did things right. Yeah. On diet, right?
Sleep. He probably sleeps like 3 hours also.
I mean,
up
Phil,
on YouTube, whatever.
Phil, I know you brought up a story about, and I believe you talked about this, but Luke Thomas said you had to correct him on a story at the website he was writing for that they were listing one of the lead people from this organization as a doctor when she's really not a doctor whatsoever. And could you explain? I think it's a Florida-based thing that you can get that name, you can get that title because of how the laws work in Florida, or something along those lines.
Yeah, so I have, obviously registered dietitians that I converse with also, and I know them personally, and we're close. And they were pretty mad, to say the least. They were pissed that she was being said that she was a doctor and things like that. Now, I don't know the laws behind it or whatever, and I'm not really trying to say that she's not. But I tried to make sure that I was fair by saying that maybe you need to look back at it and see that she's not really what she says she is. Maybe Tony, you may be able to answer this one better than I can, but from what I heard, she's a registered acupuncturist. She's
a licensed acupuncturist in the state of Florida. The nomenclature by licensure, you're allowed to say acupuncture physician. Okay. That's a legal title in the state of Florida, but it's in most states, I believe in almost any other state, to be licensed. And she's probably incredible at acupuncture. Let me make that clear. Seriously, like, yeah, she may be the best. I don't know. And I'm very open to that, genuinely. She has a legitimate education in that and full licensure, and that's legit. I know that you can call yourself a physician of acupuncture in the state of Florida, where I believe it is licensure in almost all other states. So you can't use the word physician. So in Florida, you can use the word physician. I don't think you can use the word doctor. I think strictly by standards of the law, it's acupuncture physician. And I want to say that she may be the best. And I mean that. I have no idea, because it's not a discipline of mine. I would never even comment on that. But, it's very hard. As I was saying earlier, to be an expert in 9 different things, and you try to get a good overview of what's going on. Like we said, Phil and I don't know everything in the that has to go. We just try to understand it, because it helps us do our job better. That's all. So that's how the law works on that. I looked it up because I'll concede that after I was kind of banged up a little bit on the phone call, I didn't know who I was speaking with till after the phone call. So I did some research, and just because I was curious about, whom I was speaking with. So I thought to be honest, it by methods of the conversation, it better have been Jonas Salk, because, I had a lot to learn. I can say that. So.
Now, I wanted to transition in a little bit, and maybe you guys can give you some info on how they're able to, based off of what they're doing, what is making them so special that they are getting such big name fighters to trust in them and be, work with them. Is it things like, calling yourself a physician when you're not maybe necessarily a typical traditional physician that most people would think of throughout the states? I know it seemed like Joanna had a more than just, you guys are cool with your fighters, but in the end, when you're in camp, it's professional. You have that professional relationship, you have your friendship, whatever after. But it seemed like they were like very close. They had a very high level of influence over her. I know, Tony, you mentioned, they seem to do more things than your usual nutritionists, maybe things like laundry or whatnot. Like, what have you maybe heard in your experiences and just in the industry of some of the more odd things, or some of the ways they seem to wrangle these great fighters without maybe having the experience and resume of guys like you, because they don't have the resume. On their website, they talk about the first fighter they worked with. It wasn't Randy Couture. How are they getting these big name fighters to get on their programs?
Well, I do know this much. And let me be fair, right? Fair is fair. They've had a lot of fighters who were successful. So I can't discount that. I can tell you that I vehemently, wholeheartedly disagree with their approach to much of what they do. And they probably disagree with everything that I do. That's okay. I don't need somebody to approve of what I do. I just ask, that there's decency and respect in the approach across the board. My point, though, is they get it through one of the management companies that I shall keep nameless, but they had close working relationships with a sports management company, and to the best of my knowledge, so whomever that company had signed on, they were often referred to them. So that's where I don't know how that working relationship started. And let me throw in something about the company. Everybody that I've ever spoken to at this particular company on their worst day was wonderful, and I mean that from my heart. They're a great company filled with good people. So I have nothing negative to say about that management company. Yeah. I don't know how the initial relationship was established, but the way it did work would be the same way that if somebody comes into ATT and needs S&C, they're going to Phil. He's the captain. Yeah. Well, the way it was there is, okay, we're going to refer you to these individuals if you need assistance with weight cut and stuff along those lines. So that I don't know where the initial marriage was with the company. And I had spoken to many people from the company, just telling them that, whatever they want to do is absolutely fine. But that's where probably 70 to 80%, I would guess, of the clientele, that's my guess number, come from. And again, I want to reiterate and close it on the people at that company are extremely professional and great. I have worked with them with several fighters, and they're awesome. But that's where the connection comes from.
I feel. I mean, what's just some of the stuff you've heard about how they you know, because they're getting fighters from all over the country. I mean, how are they getting some of the? Is that management company? Are they linked with so many fighters all over the country that they're even getting ATT fighters now too? They can get fighters at Longo MMA. They get ATT. How, you know, what have you heard?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. What Tony's talking about is, they were linked in with some people there that helped them connect with other people and other fighters. So I mean, and it is really a lot of it, and it's pretty much how the world is ran. It's it's who you know, and then primarily at the end of the day, it's what you know that actually keeps you in that that certain position. So I mean, same thing happened with me. Luckily, I've been a part of American Top Team, but truthfully, if I didn't ask Dean Thomas if he had any fighters that he wanted me to work with, I probably wouldn't be at American Top Team right now working with the highest level of fighters in the world. So, but, from me, that's why I've been there for 2 years now. It's what that keeps you there and keeps you moving and keeps you progressing, but also learning more and keep learning more. And that's one issue that I think that was hindering them, but like I said, man, I don't want this to be a true full-on bash session of PA, but at the end of the day, I felt total, heartbroken that I seen my fighter actually lose her title, lose everything pretty much in that, whatever first round where it wasn't really her. It didn't look like her. She wasn't moving, she wasn't moving the way she moves. Her timing was off. Her distance was well off. And everybody really could see it. And at the end of the day, nobody wanted to point it at the weight cut, obviously. But I knew in my heart that was the main issue, the true issue there, because that's just not who I see on a daily basis in the gym. So at the end of the day, I don't want to make excuses for her, and she doesn't need me to make excuses for her. But I'm just going to defend my fighter. I'm going to defend my team. And this is how I'm going to do it. But at the end of the day, we're going to move forward. We're going to progress. We're going to get things in order. And we're going to get that title back. So that's all that matters.
Yeah, and that's perfectly stated, Jason. I just want to, what Phil is saying, it's not about, and no one, I think Rose is a wonderful fighter, a super nice girl. And so I was happy for her too. I'm a big Joanna fan, but she's a wonderful young girl. It's just, I've seen Joanna get hit with things, maybe it was the perfect punch. I wasn't there. I watched it on TV, but I've seen Joanna get hit a lot and never really suffer that much with one particular strike. That was where I do agree with Phil. And it's not about a bashing session. What I would say, my primary message is this. I've been doing this my whole life, and I know that I don't know a lot. And I know that I love the people that I work with, and I love the people that I meet through this game. I get to, learn from my good friend, Dr. Sean Arendt, a brilliant research scientist at Rutgers, Dr. Andy Galpin, a great friend of Phil's, a brilliant young scientist. We share, we learn, we know we don't know. My primary message is this. It is not so much that my strategies differ from theirs. It is that the utter rejection of anyone who had a different approach or not finding out more about the people you were working with in advance is where I have a problem with their practice. Okay, that's the issue. It's I don't know everything. I need to keep learning. I'm going to tell you straight out right now, I absolutely, when I was young, effed up one of my fighters. And you know what he did? But with the training, he murdered the guy. And then I've done a perfect camp, and the guy got hammered. So my point to that is we make mistakes, we do, and we don't see them. We do great, and it's a big mistake. That all happens. We're all trying to do the best we can in this. But the utter rejection of anyone else and their knowledge as a integral part of what you're doing is my issue. That's my issue. That's where I have the problem here. So I'm making that statement very clear. I think people know me. I'm a pretty nice guy. I don't care if somebody's a better coach than me, or I don't, who cares? I just want to keep getting better. But I'm not one that's used to being spoken to in a capacity as if I'm a 4-year-old who has no purpose being where I am. And to be honest, that's my issue with this whole thing. And maybe some more openness or maybe some more collaboration would just help in the case of Joanna. So I'm with Phil. It's not about a bashing session. It's about, look, this is a game in which we all have to continue to progress. And arrogance is really a big problem for young fighters who work their tail off and kill themselves for 3 years. And then, you can't maybe make a small change to do what's best for the fighter. That's my whole message here right now.
I mean, that's perfectly said. I mean, the last thing I wanted to ask, and we can leave listeners on this note. I mean, and you guys said it perfect. This isn't like an attack on perfecting athletes. It's just trying to get information out there and airing personal grievances that you guys had built up for a long time. And you're not the only ones. I mean, you may have even gotten messages from other trainers and their frustrations or questions or wondering what's going on, since such a massive influential fighter like Joanna Jedrzejczyk has to make statements like that and make such a drastic opinion on it. This is more of a PSA to just a fighter out there, because it's interesting you bring up the point that the management team is connected with them and they suggest to the fighter. That doesn't mean the fighter has to do it. What would your message be to a young fighter or even a veteran fighter out there? Maybe if even they're looking for nutrition or they're looking for anybody, is this the message? Maybe they shouldn't just take who management suggests. Like, should a fighter do the best they can in doing their due diligence and looking at all the options instead of maybe just taking on referrals from what they get at management, even though they may trust what their decisions are?
I have a lot of fighters that take control of their own camp, that take control of their own profession. I think that the main thing is you have to do your research as a fighter, as an athlete, and actually see, what or who they've worked with and where their credentials lie, and take control, like I said, and not usually go with what other people are saying, but from that perspective, also, you trust in the people that are working for you. So, the people that are working for you, you have to make sure that they know what they're doing, and they're leading you in the right direction. As at the same time, you need to do your own research and look into the situation as well.
Tony?
Yeah. I think Phil is right on. And I think you can, detect something. I don't want to be, we're kind of making fun of the new Mets manager there. I know you're a Mets fan. I'm not making fun of him, but people are. Mickey Callaway, because all he talked about was being caring and sensitive to the athlete. Yeah. And then Aaron Boone to the Yanks, we're going to care. You know what, though? You could tell who's doing this because they love it. They're doing it because they want to be better at it. Mm-hmm. The fighter can discern this in time. They're doing it, though, with some sense of humility that they have to continue to strive and get better at it. And yeah, they do care. They don't just care. They care about being good. That's what they care about. Okay? If that individual already just absolutely assumes they're good, I'm the best, be careful of that. Be careful of that. I'm not saying like a guy like Phil with all his work should not be highly confident. Mm-hmm. Phil knows he's good, but Phil knows he needs to get better. Okay? And so Phil keeps striving to get better. People who care about what they do show it in what they keep trying to do to improve themselves too. The fighter wants to improve their jab, their kick, their shot, their takedown defense. I want to improve my knowledge of electrolyte distribution post weigh-in, the distribution of these electrolytes when carbohydrates are included, all of that. Every day I just keep trying to learn. I'm not saying that the fighter is going to know automatically who that individual is, but you'll know by how they treat other people in the camp after a while. You'll know that, hey, this guy gives a shit. This guy cares about what he's doing, how he's doing it, and he cares about making me better. Not that he cares about being the best. That comes out. That'll Phil and think his fighters think he's the best, and they damn well should. Not because he thinks he's the best, because he wants to be the best. There's a huge, huge difference in that. So the discernment comes from, hey, who is this guy? Who is this woman? Why is she in it? Is it a burning love? Is it just for them? Or is it because he or she wants to do it, become better, but in the end, make me better? That's really what it comes down to. I know that kind of sounds cliche or hard to really decipher who that is. But in time, the fighter will know. You'll get that down.
I mean, this was a fun experience. A ton of information out there for people listening, for fighters, for fans, for trainers, for manager, for everybody, to further clarify some things on a hot topic right now. Tony, before we go, as always, we did on FSP, on the other shows. Give them the social media. I'm hoping this further makes people want to follow you because of your expertise, and you're just an all-around awesome guy. Let them know the Instagram and the Facebook and all the things, and the Fight Shape, all the places they can follow you and learn more from you.
Well, I will say this. Any future post I do is going to be about Phil. Not that he needs me to do anything about him or in his defense, because I did one post and I got 100 followers. That's double what I have overnight. Anyway, it was, I honestly, I did, there was I did a post on Instagram because it was really more, not that Phil needs it, but, Phil's my friend, of course, and I think he's great, and it was in defense of him, but even though he doesn't need that defense, I felt compelled after Joanna's loss. But nevertheless, it's just on Instagram, I'm at Fight Shape, and there's an / my last name, Ricci. I'm on Facebook under Tony Ricci. I'll be doing the whole Twitter thing. And, and Phil and I are going to do something that I think is important too. And we're going to take our best practices. We are going to combine some of the research. We're going to combine our experiences. And we're going to just, what I think we're going to title Concepts in Weight Cut. And we say concepts because it's concepts based upon science and practice. And yes, sometimes in weight cut, I get it. There's a little bit of feel. There's a little bit of guesswork. Yeah. But you're guessing on which principle to use. You're not guessing on what to do. But the point to that is we're going to put a little ebook together and a little series called Concepts in Weight Cut, in which we try to aggregate the best ideas and practices that we've both done and what we've learned from and what we've read and what our research friends and scientists have taught us. And I think it's going to be really helpful. I think it's, at the very least, going to have people go and think in a wonderful direction and make their own decisions on how a proper cut should occur. But I'm looking forward to collaborating on this with Phil. It's going to be a great ebook, and probably will maybe guys do part of it as a little series on the show too, right?
Yep, definitely. Yeah. I'm actually honored to be able to actually be a point guard for Tony on this one, because he is man on this subject. I've had, obviously practical application on it, and I always am studying and asking questions, asking questions from guys like Tony. So, I mean, it's going to be good. We're going to actually go through the entire, processes of what we do, from the rehydration process to even 7 days out from that weight cut itself. And we'll go from there, but just be on the lookout for that. And like I said, I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to be doing, we'll do a podcast series on it too as well, just because we just want to get as much education out to people as possible. So things like what we've seen in the past do not happen again.
Amen.
And the social, as always, the deal.
Oh, okay. Yep. So Instagram is Daru Strong. Twitter is at Daru Strong. And then my Snapchat with all my videos and things like that, Daru Strong 1. Also, if you have any type of questions or you want to get virtual coaching, have any seminar requests, anything like that, you can email me, phil@darustrong.com.
Let me just say my Twitter, Cheap Seats Chat, Jericho Vendetta, Instagram, the show, you can find on Facebook at Fight Strength Podcast, and you can find the show on Twitter at Fight Strength _. But let's talk about Poland, and someone is going to be doing some presenting, some awards. So what's going on, Big Philly?
Nice.
Yeah, man, I'm actually going to Poland twice in May and June. So I'll be out there at the Combat Sports Performance Summit, talking with those people out there. And then also another one in May. I really can't say too much about it just yet because it's still in the works. But yeah, it's going to be good, man. If you're in Poland, make sure you stop by, check out my Instagram, and then also there's a link there that you could go to see all what's going on as far as the instruction of how you can get involved and actually attend the seminar and the whole summit in general. But I'll be going over, different type of periodization models that I do for fight camp. Also, rehydration processes in weight cutting, which is what we're going to be talking about in the ebook. Auto-regulation techniques, my gluten hip activation series that I ran, that you've probably seen on my Instagram with the guys at Bearcoot, and some other new things that I have going on as well. Also, we'll be talking about lactic glycolytic conditioning. Also, just a bunch of different things, man. I could go into a rant, but I'm not going to do it because I want to talk to Tony about this ebook. So, but it's coming out, man. If you're, like I said, if you're in Poland, make sure you go ahead and check it out in May and in June.
I mean, we talked about this a few episodes ago, but fighters only for the World MMA Awards, man. This guy, Phil Daru, traveling the world, Russia, Poland, the country, doing seminar work, doing presentation work. He needs to be nominated for Trainer of the Year. Listeners, if you want Phil Daru nominated for Trainer of the Year 2018, contact Fighters Only. I have. They don't want to answer me. They know the deal. They better let him know Phil needs to be nominated Trainer of the Year. That's how we're gonna.
I'm gonna work on that campaign with you, Jason.
Yes.
Oh, man.
Look at Tony
we're gonna
Ricci.
get the shirts.
Look at
Printing them
unbelievable.
up tomorrow. Vote Phil.
Unbelievable. The testimony from Tony Ricci. If Tony Ricci tells you to do it, you got to get it done. Fighters only. Wake up. But I am Jason Burgos. Tony Ricci, thank you as always so much for coming on. You're pretty much the other co-host on the show almost at this point. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's always great. Great to be with you guys. I mean it from the heart. I really enjoy it.
It's always an honor.
And he is Phil Daru. That is it for us this week. Oh yeah, remember, find us on iTunes, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, Google Play, YouTube, Player FM. All the old episodes, all the old stuff, and even the old stuff with Tony Ricci. But that is it for this week. Bye-bye, everybody.